Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This is an area of Russia in the middle of a big forested area. What happens out here? What would it be like living alone in a cabin right in the middle to get away from humanity? Would you encounter unknowable things in the middle of the night? I often wonder about these things. I bet it would be terrifying.
The absolute vastness of the taiga is mind-blowing. You have a feeling that the land goes on to infinity, and in a way it does. From looking at maps, you have a feeling that Siberia has a northern shoreline. The truth is that if you were a superhuman, you could walk to Canada on foot. A lot of the land is unexplored, and few dare to try. The people that try just vanish and never turn up again, swallowed by the primordial forests. And when you do try to explore, like I did, you gather up a bunch of historians, folklorists, and ethnologists with a death wish and just go. And by go, I mean bounce from city to town to village, from village to settlement, and then you try to locate a tribe, for the usual reasons. Food, water to document directions and stories. Sometimes you find a village before you run out of half the supplies and are forced to turn back. Sometimes you find a person who speaks Russian in the village. Sometimes they tell tall tales of monsters, demons, and gods, show you rituals and symbols. Sometimes you find a village, but it's empty. No one there, only a few symbols carved into wood, stone, or metal, usually with the meaning of turn back. You don't argue. Those times you feel like someone is watching you. You sweat cold. Other times you find monoliths and obelisks in such remote places where humans simply can't live. In the deeper parts, there are people who don't know the USSR no longer exists.
Well, I asked my mother about creepy shaman stories. She told me two. The first one is from my father's friend. I will try to make a green text of it just to be fancy. Be my father's friend, FF to be short. Be a diver. Participate in the operation of cleaning the Baikal Lake. As FF comes to the shore, the locals say to disturb the waters and keep the things at the bottom as they are. Doesn't care, he has a job to do. Diving time. Find many tires, trash, and even vehicles. Feels good to help the environment. Another car is pulled up. Open the trunk. There is a dead body in chains. The car is really old, and the body is in unusual clothes. Call the police, the locals pull up. The locals say that the dead body is in fact some evil shaman or witch. My mother wasn't quite sure what to call her. She kept the nearest villages in terror, so some brave men put her in the trunk and sent her to the bottom of the lake. That's a cool story. Police can't do anything, it's a remote place, and the case of murder is too old to seek for the guilty. The job is done. Get back home. Feel sick for a month. High temperature, blood pressure, and seizures. Crewmates die one by one. Oh great. Medicine doesn't help. There is only one thing left. Visit another shaman, ask for help. He does his job, calls to the spirits, puts the magical defense. Feel good again. Thanks, spirits. The second story is less paranormal, but still creepy and interesting. This story is also from my friend. Be an attorney. Another case. Woman went missing. Investigation time. No investigation needed. Her neighbor says that it was him. He murdered her and dug up the corpse in Taiga. Still need the body as a proof. He shows the place where he allegedly buried the body. No corpse to be found. Because it is Taiga, the investigation group has a woodsman among them.
Oh, it must be the bear. They love eating corpses. The body must be down the hill. It is easier to pull the corpse there.
Okay, let's go. After a while they find a corpse. Decapitated dog PNG. The woodsman speaks again.
Yeah, bears love eating brains. It is like ice cream for them. To take out the brains, he needs water. Let's go to the nearest creek.
Actual bear footprints. After some searching, the woman's head was found, with a cracked cranium and almost no brains in it. Case solved. Thanks, woodsman. The woodsman got many presents from the investigation team for solving the case. The murderer was sent to prison.
The taiga is filled with cannibals. The Soviet prison system is overcrowded and they regularly pick up the worst offenders and dump them into the middle of nowhere. There are trains that run west to east, and it's not uncommon for the government to lease out 2 or 3 carriages and send people out to work camps for logging or mining. Most of them die due to lack of resources. A few become wild men and kidnap women and children from nearby villages. There isn't much to eat out there, so cannibalism is common. There have been a few well-known cases publicized in Russian media, missing people in abandoned villages with nearby research facilities. In the 70s, a commercial Soviet plane went down hundreds of miles away from any human habitation, but they got their radio functioning and SOS calls were picked up. It was a huge international story because they had multiple nationalities on board and people were tracking their rescue effort. Americans offered to help. It was during a softening of relations in the Cold War. Anyway, about 8 days into the crash, the survivors started acting more frantic. They complained about weird animals digging up bodies of the freshly deceased and hearing strange noises coupled with shimmering lights in the forest around them at night. It was chalked up to temporary madness and the gaseous swamp conditions they had crashed landed into some kind of ancient bog, methane exposure. Their radio signals went completely silent after 10 days and the rescue crew managed to cut a road to them only by the 14th. The story got buried after that. Apparently, the survivors had gone completely crazy and attacked each other. The few that were still alive when rescued were shipped off to special facilities for prolonged treatment and the curtain was pulled over. Interest resurfaced in the case in the 2000s when Putin declassified old Soviet documents because this particular case was treated as a UFO incident since the plane went down in strange circumstances.
On a cabin trip with girlfriend, Hannah, a friend of mine, Fred, and his girlfriend, Ingrid, during the summer holiday. It's about an hour walk from girlfriend's hometown, so not completely in the wilderness, but it's still away from civilization and it has poor mobile reception. There is an area with pastures and cabins, and a massive wood of evergreens that I guess is part of the Taiga belt. The area is used as summer pastures for sheep and at times cows, so they hang around there. First evening we were just sitting on the porch when suddenly a group of 12 or something sheep and lambs just ran like all hell past the cabin. There are no predators in the area besides foxes, so it was a bit weird, but sheep are stupid and easily spooked, so we don't really think much about it. That night I had drank one too many beers, so I had to get up and take a piss at around 3 a.m. This is in Norway, so it never really gets dark during the summer. I'm on a bathroom break when I hear a really messed up sound. It sounded almost like a wolf howl, but also like someone getting their nails pulled out with pliers. Far, far away, and it sounded like it came from a densely wooded area that starts about 300 meters from the cabin. Nope, as hard as I never have ever done in my life to get my ass back inside, no more sleep for me that night. Tell Hannah, Fred, and Ingrid about it the next morning. They were all passed out, so they did not hear anything. Girls are spooked, but Fred laughs and calls me a coward. Next day we went for a hike up to the mountains. After an hour or so we come across a sheep carcass on the trail. Now sheep getting themselves killed on the summer pastures is not unusual. Usually those dumb assholes fall to their death or something, but this was in a pretty flat area, so that seemed very unlikely. None of us know much about this, but it looks like it has been there a couple of days and that birds and other animals have had their way with it. Right now I'm spooked, but I compose myself and we carry on. Can't shake the feeling that we are being observed somehow. Get back to the cabin at around 6 p.m. and we start preparing dinner and getting a fire ready for the evening. Ingrid goes to get firewood that is stored in a small shed about 50 meters or so from the cabin. I stand in the kitchen when I see her through the window come spriting back, with no wood. She slams the door shut and is completely hysterical, claiming she saw a big animal walking on its hind legs just inside the tree line. She's hysterical, Hannah is scared, I know, but try to keep a straight face. My friend says the girls are ridiculous and that it must have been a person. People do hike in the area, but rarely in the spruce woods since it's just dark and shitty in there. Eventually we calm down a bit and after some alcohol we forget about it and the mood picks up. We sit there when the house scream comes again. Difference is that everyone hears it this time. We collectively nope out of there, collect our things and get our asses inside. Now there are wolves in Norway, but not in the area. Once a decade or so a stray can wander here, but it's super rare and they usually get shot and tranked pretty fast. Inside, both girls are scared to death. Me and Fred try to act tough, but we both are scared too. Wolves are one thing, but something about this just felt wrong. We spend most of the evening looking out the windows, and all agree that no one goes outside alone and that we all should sleep in the same bedroom, so we bring mattresses to the floor so me and my friends can sleep on while the girls take the bed. I don't know about the others, but after what seems like an eternity I fall asleep. Suddenly in the middle of the night I woke up to a loud bang on the outside wall. Girls both screamed their lungs out and suddenly Ingrid, who is next to the window, eyes widen and she turns white as a sheet and starts hyperventilating. We just sit there and look at her, but suddenly Hannah yells at me and tells me to call for help. Despite the poor signal up there I luckily get 1 bar of signal, but really have no clue who to call really. The cops? Suddenly I remember that both of my girlfriend's brothers, Roger and Eirik, hunt and they have ATVs. I call one of them, it's in the middle of the night, but luckily he picks up the phone. He's not thrilled about getting woken up in the middle of the night, but I guess he can sense the panic in my voice so he takes me seriously. I tell him there is a wolf or something stalking us, and I ask him to get his brother, brings guns, and get here ASAP. While we sit there, scared shitless, we can hear something walking outside and we can hear heavy breathing. We closed the curtains and no one dared to go near the window. Ingrid is still white as paper and can't say a word. 15 minutes or so later, we hear engines and girlfriend's brothers arrive with rifles on their backs. They are not too happy, but once they see us, and especially Ingrid, they take us seriously. There is no way we can fit 6 grown people on one ATV, so we decide that we wait until morning before we go back down. We tell them about everything, they look at each other, but do not say anything. When we are done, Roger tells us that if there really is a wolf in the area, they first need to get permission from the authorities to assemble a hunting party and shoot it, because if you don't you risk some serious jail time unless you kill it in self-defense. Next morning as soon as the sun rises we haul ass from there and get back to my girlfriend's parents. Not much drama there and we felt much safer when we had people with guns there. When we get back down, Ingrid finally speaks again. She's sobbing and tells us she saw a big animal that rounded the corner of the cabin and that it was much larger than an ordinary wolf, but not a bear either. Collective nopes from all of us, but we at least are safe now and none of us ever want to go back to that cabin in our lives. Next part is second hand since I did not experience it myself. Roger and Eirik contact the authorities about the wolf the next day. Turns out several people beat them to it and there had been several people reporting about disemboweled sheep and 2 hikers reported hearing a weird howl. With so many reports they granted a limited permission to hunt the animal and any licensed volunteer with a hunting license could go. Eirik and Roger were thrilled, since the most dangerous thing they had hunted before was deer and a lot of other hunters came along. Around 10 or so total. They too go in one group. A friend of theirs they call Puma goes in another with his father. They kept at it all day without seeing or hearing anything. It was getting really late, but they agreed over radio to keep at it since they had plenty of food, although it was getting pretty foggy. Eirik and Roger don't see anything, but at around 11 p.m. they heard the howl far away from where they were and both of them agree it did sound screwed up in some way. They did have Puma on radio and he was about 5 kilometers or from where they were. And he said the howl was quite close. This is what Puma told Eirik and Roger, which they have told me. He never talks about it unless he drinks and they say he usually tears up and he has not been the same since, so this is second hand of second hand. Puma and his father were walking in those spruce woods next to the cabin, when they heard the howl. He said it had to be less than a kilometer away and his blood froze to ice, because there was no way that was a wolf, he claimed. He shoulders his rifle and looks through the scope. He says he thinks he saw something walk on 2 legs, but he can't be sure since he does not have a clear LOS. He said he almost relieved himself in his pants then and there, but they radioed the other hunters and asked for backup. Most of them are too far away to get there in a reasonable amount of time, but one group is quite close. He says as they are walking towards the other group and they are within earshot, he hears another sound. This time it sounds like a man screaming and it's loud as all hell. They run towards the other group, don't know what to think and they meet up. Everyone heard it, but it was none of them. They meet up, 5 grown-ass men and everyone is freaking out. One of the other hunters claimed he saw a hairy guy with yellow eyes through his binoculars, but the others would not believe him since that was nuts. They all agree to get the hell out of there. After 10 minutes or so they get out of the spruce woods and Puma swears he hears a messed up laugh, almost like a hyena, when they get out of the woods. That's all I know about it. Roger and Eirik still hunt in the area, but they both say they are more of a guard now. Puma flat out refuses to go back.
Nothing to existentially dread, just endless expanses of trees, moss, and animas. It's just a bunch of life. Imagine all the animals who for maybe their entire lineage have never seen human society, nowhere in their genetic memory. If a king of the forest exists, it would be roaming somewhere in the heart of all this. Maybe they already have, but it would be cool if some explorers' society set up an excursion to the deepest part of the woods. Parachute down from a plane and keep the sturdiest GPS trackers on them possible, with planes doing regular checks from last coordinates and the participants having the best survival skills possible.
Hey guys, East Europe and on here. I'm a Russian native speaker. Should I translate some good old stories from Russian/X/? I have a whole bunch of really nice stories saved on my drive. I'll get translating ASAP. It happened about 10 years ago, when I got a job as a paramedic in an ambulance right after medical school. I didn't work there for long. The daily shifts were exhausting, the pay was small, and the work was hellish. But that's not the point. Even for this short time, I saw all sorts of things. That one grandmother called the ambulance because she had demons stealing medicine, and the other was tormented by demons coming out of the ceiling. At first, this is kind of surprising, but you quickly get used to it. You get so tired on the shift that you do not care whether there are devils, demons, or something else otherworldly. But I remember one case to this day. I remember it perfectly, like a picture in front of my eyes. I don't know why, but every time I remember it, I feel uncomfortable. It's scary. It's fall. It's been raining outside almost all day. It's damp and smells of fading. At about 8 p.m., a man, 53 years old, became ill. No details. There's nothing else to do. We're on our way. By the way, we have no right to refuse the call, whatever the reason. With me is a Dr. Viktor Ivanovich. Such, at first glance, a stereotypical doctor with gray hair, sharp eyes, and a neat beard. Always serious and wary. He does not like jokes, but he knows his business perfectly. By evening, we are already exhausted, but we are still holding up well. There is no other way. The night is ahead, the most stressful time. We go to the exit quietly. It does not seem like anything difficult. We stop at the entrance to the address. It's an ordinary 4-story Khrushchev-era building. Most of the windows are lit. Almost everyone has already returned from work. Outside, the wind rolls wet leaves around. The rain has eased, but it hasn't stopped completely. It's chilly. We go up to the second floor. I carry a box of medication. Viktor Ivanovich presses the bell button. The door is opened by a woman of modest stature, her face a mixture of excitement, despair, and fear. I immediately felt a twinge in my chest. It seems that the call will not be as easy as we thought. Come in, he's in the kitchen. The apartment is quite ordinary, well-maintained and bright. The wallpaper is nice, the furniture looks new. But I catch myself thinking that the atmosphere it's heavy, unpleasant. I don't know why. I'm shivering. Sometimes you feel like you don't like a place. You just don't like it. This is exactly like that. Right across from the front door is the room. To the right is the kitchen. There's a man sitting in the kitchen. A big man with a shaved head, a stern face, a strong chin. And this chin is trembling. A little. The man holds an empty mug in his hands, but his palms are shaking too. He's looking at one point, and his eyes look like he's just come out of a fire. His wife comes over and explains. I listen and realize I'm getting sick myself. The man's name is Volodya. He works in the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Doesn't drink, doesn't even smoke. The day before, he came in the morning from his 24-hour shift. Everything was normal. He ate, took a shower, and went to sleep. His wife went to work. When she came back, she found him like this, in the kitchen with crazy eyes. When asked what happened, he wouldn't answer for a long time, but then he gave in. He said something that made my wife question him several times. I woke up, watched TV, and rested. I came to the bedroom, and a scary black scarecrow was sitting on the bed and giving birth. Of course, in the bedroom, my wife didn't find anything except for our disassembled bed. But for the first time in her life, she said, she saw her husband afraid of something to the point of trembling. She called an ambulance. What else was there to do? Viktor Ivanovich sighed. He asked Volodya, "Is it true?" He nodded. I stand silent and honestly have no idea what to do in such cases. Viktor Ivanovich takes Volodya's blood pressure, asks him about his health. Everything is perfect. He's never had anything worse than a cold. "Good," says Viktor Ivanovich. "Let's go and have a look." Volodya obviously doesn't want to, but agrees. Probably hopes that there is really nothing in the bedroom. Not anymore. We go to the door. Viktor Ivanovich steps into the bedroom first, followed by Volodya. I hear a suppressed groan. It's here. It's just sitting there. What is that? Volodya staggers back out of the bedroom. His whole body was trembling. His face is flushed, sweat beading on his forehead. Viktor Ivanovich gestured for me to come into the room. I go in, and I'm scared. What if I actually see it? But no, just a crumpled bed. Nothing else. But at the same time, I feel heavy in this room. I don't know, like there's pressure, and I can hear some kind of rumbling in my ear. Viktor Ivanovich looks at me worriedly. He doesn't know what to do about it, but he seems to feel the pressure and heavy atmosphere too. He shakes his head, as if shaking off an apparition, and then everything happens very quickly. Volodya decides to enter the bedroom again. He takes a step and looks at the bed, and I can really see that this man is not lying. He sees something, because it looks like that can't lie. "Oh my God, what is that?" Volodya's voice is shaking, but he's trying to pull himself together. You can see it. "I don't know, I don't understand. It's scary." Here his face distorts in horror. He covers his mouth with his palm. Tears naturally start to flow from his eyes. It turns around. Great, it sees me. Volodya abruptly turns around and runs away. So fast that we don't have time to react. The front door slams. He runs out onto the stairs in his home clothes, even without shoes. I rush after him, but he's already gone. Our driver, Tolik, is standing outside by the car. He says, "Some man flew out of the entrance and ran away into the darkness." And I have nothing to say. No words. I return to the apartment. His wife is crying, and Viktor Ivanovich is comforting her, but he's not able to do anything about it. He takes one last look at the bed in the bedroom and throws me a short, "Let's go." And in his eyes there's anxiety and fear. We sat in silence for a few minutes in the car. Viktor Ivanovich is fiddling with a ballpoint pen. "What did you see there?" he asks. "Nothing, but the sensations were not good." Viktor Ivanovich sighs and adjusts his glasses on his nose, and then he says something I never expected him to say. "The feeling, yes. But when we left, did you see that big mirror hanging on the closet door in the bedroom? Just the bed. I just caught a glimpse, and there was like a dark silhouette in the reflection. Right on the bed. I didn't look at it a second time. If I saw it, I saw it. And if it wasn't, I don't want to know. I could say that I didn't sleep for a long time after that incident. But it's not true. After a day you pass out immediately. But I still remember that line. There's a scary black scarecrow sitting on the bed giving birth. And it's still creepy for some reason. It's a pity we never found out what happened to Volodya. Perhaps he really needed help then, but there was no one to help him.
Mirny is a town in the Republic of Sakha-Yakutia, nearly 3,800 miles east of Moscow. There, in the basin of the Viliui River, Russia has its own Death Valley. In the late 19th century, Russian explorer Richard Mach recorded strange tales told by locals about paranormal activity in this place. One of the local rivers is called Algaidach, which means a place with cauldrons. Another stream is called Algae Timernet. The big cauldron sunk. Locals told Mach that giant pots are buried deep in the earth, with edges as sharp as razors and made of red metal. Some partly stuck out of the ground, and those who spent a night under them woke up feeling ill, weak, and with an aching head. In the 19th century, locals said they even encountered giant people, who were one-eyed and clad in metal, sleeping underneath the cauldrons. Reports about mysterious spheres continued even in the 1930s. Since the 1970s, numerous expeditions have tried to locate the cauldrons, but to no avail. Local hunters avoid Death Valley and say the terrain has changed so much that they can't possibly remember where the objects might have been. Later research has shown that the strange effects in the valley were possibly the result of toxic volcanic gases coming from underground, and they were also the cause of the confusion locals experienced. The toxic gases befuddled their senses and led to fatigue. This is also the reason the area is so poorly researched.
I used to work in the gas industry as a geologist. From 2007 to 2009, I was in contrast with a Russian company called Northgas, back when industrial relations with the UK were still fairly cordial. There were lots of potential gas sites in this Siberian region far up north, and I used to go around potential sites with company borehole engineers, usually in groups of 2 to 3. Anyway, I was at one site in northern Siberia with a German engineer in late October of 2008. Took ages to get to and completely devoid of human habitation, but really beautiful taiga. Endless forests on the drive up there. Anyway, the site we went to survey was fairly typical of what you expect in the industry at these sorts of locations: thin topsoil giving way to permeable siltstone, excellent locations for surveying. Now to the story. We came to a location where satellite imagery was suggesting that permafrost was retreating. It still snows and ices over, of course, but the key point is that it's not entirely frozen over. You can install stuff during the summer months, get gas production up. It was a pretty boring landscape though, very thin topsoil giving way rapidly to permeable siltstone. Lots of these natural holes all over the place too, permafrost plugs that had melted and left 20 to 30 meter deep holes dotted all over the place. We decided to stay a few weeks and do some test surveys. First week was completely fine, got some good locations, and things progressed smoothly. By the end of that week though, things were getting a little weird. Every time I would go out with the spectrometer after that first week, I'd occasionally hear some noises from the holes. I was never near them, because while you get a lot of gas coming off these things, they're not terribly good for industrial drilling. It was faint, just on the border of hearing. I never knew how to describe those noises until a few years later when someone took me out to a jazz bar and some guy was playing a violin-like instrument that made this drone noise, like a thumb. Disconcerting, makes your hair stand up. My colleague would notice this too. Disconcerting, as in this job, you're not really working together, but apart. So two of us were hearing stuff out there. We were both rational people, at the time for me, at least, so we put it down to cave noises. Laugh, forget it. About 10 days into this survey, it started happening at night. Again, faint, but really ominous. That drone noise. We used to sleep in the back of the van we had brought, but even through those doors we heard it. Again, stop being stupid, it's cave noises, laugh, have a few beers, go to sleep. It got worse from there. The day after, I found some slime stuff around one of the permafrost boreholes. Yeah, you get lichens and mosses around these things, not an issue, but this was like petroleum jelly, that really viscous stuff. I touched it and immediately regretted it, it felt a lot like pork belly fat. It was warm too, which was really disturbing, considering it was -5 Celsius during the day out there. Bring round the German engineer to take a look, he looks troubled. For the rest of the day I was constantly on edge too. I kept looking back at the borehole too, just to check, I kept saying to myself. Things got worse at night. That drone noise got a lot worse, but it felt, and I know that's a poor way of putting it, like it wasn't from below, but above, on the surface. My German engineer tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was seriously disturbed by it. Just that low thumb. Eventually we get to sleep. God knows how many hours later though, we woke up together because there was definitely something attempting to open the door handle to the passenger seat of the van. Click, click, click. And now that drone is right outside, and it sounds a lot like gurgling. At this point we both freak out and scream like a pair of little girls. It stops. We don't sleep for the rest of the night, and it doesn't come back. Next day, as soon as we make it to 9 a.m., we cautiously open the doors. The entire back door is covered in this pork fat gunk. The place reeks of something rotten too. Passenger door just smeared in that stuff. But the thing that made us immediately go, screw it, we're leaving, was the passenger window, which was also smeared in this gunk, had an outline on it, like something had pressed its skull into the fat stuff and left an outline. It was unmistakably an elongated human skull, with no eye orbitals.
You drove a van through Taiga.
Yeah. I'm not a car nut, but it was some modified Jeep that the engineer guy would just not shut up about all the way from Neuebrüsk. Jelly stuff was all over the area around us too, and of course, led all the way to that borehole. We got out of there very fast after that, but as we were packing, that drone noise started again from that hole, and it was loud. It was guttural by this point. Whatever was making it was down there and close too. The German guy went pretty nuts after that. Just hopped in, immediately started going. Equipment that was still out for methane measurements just left. Didn't stop driving for the next 14 hours. I pretty much ditched my job soon after. I had no desire to be left like that again in the middle of places like that. German guy, never heard from again. He never talked about it to me anyway. I guess distance from that event makes it sound pretty prosaic. During that night though, I was convinced I was going to die. You know how you can just know when someone or something like an animal is nice, curious, or is just out to mess you up? I knew, instinctively, that whatever wanted in didn't want to crack open a beer and ask us about geology, if you get my drift. Anyway, I spent a long time after I had calmed down about it, which took a few months, in fact, to think of a rational reason for this. Every time though, I kept butting up against the unexplainable. Sure, drone could be cave noises, but the warm slime stuff? The guttural noise? Around 2012 I got a lot into reading about frozen mammoths and the worry about viruses from the taiga that they were expecting because of climate change, and at that point I went full/X/ and said, screw it, frozen monster.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.